Well, good afternoon, viewers. Today we have a 2009 Mitsubishi Lancer. It was just dropped off by the service truck because it apparently wouldn't start. My story, or the story that I received, was that it was cranking but not firing. When it got here, it was very low voltage. I don't know if they had the four ways on or something like that. I have to find out exactly what happened in what order. When I turn the key to crank, nothing happens. That warning light's on. Check engine light on. But nothing happens. So we're going to connect the scan tool to it, see if there's any codes in any controllers that help us. So we've auto ID'd the vehicle. Let's do a code scan. Looks like it supports network code scan. Key is on, engine is off. I'm sure we're going to have some low voltage codes. Intake air temp sensor high. EEPROM fail. Hands-free module. Well, that's disconnected. I got an earlier video on this thing with the battery going dead. It actually came back a second time for that dead battery and I never found anything wrong with it. Apparently it's been fine. Low battery power, ignition power low. Implausible vehicle speed. Okay, well, are we done yet? Have we done the network scan yet? Not quite. 15 controllers. I wouldn't be too concerned about that EEPROM code. It's probably because of low battery voltage. Sunroof power supply, implausible vehicle speed, intake air temp sensor circuit high. Well, let's go into the engine control computer and see if we can see the status of the starter data. Would it be under powertrain or under accessories? Okay, I'm going to look around in here and see if I can find start. So in the relay switches charging and accessory data, we have status of the starter relay and status of the ignition switch, as well as the neutral switch. It says neutral switch on. I tried this in neutral as well as park, and the tow truck driver tried to boost it too with no success. So let's see the starter relay, what it suggests is happening. It doesn't say the status of the ignition switch, and I haven't looked at the starter circuit. That's up next. Let's try turning the key to crank. Well, it's commanding the starter relay on, but it's obviously not working. So let's find out where it lives. So the underhood relay center here has several relays in it. This one right here is labeled with an engine symbol and an S. And there's another one up here that's labeled with an engine symbol but an H. So I think this is the starter relay, but we're going to double check that. So the odd thing is, when I remove that relay, which is a fairly heavy-duty relay, the cooling fan turns on. So we better find out which one's the starter relay. So here's the electrical diagram in all data. Shows the starter relay as A-24X, and that's not on the fuse panel cover. And it's controlled by, it's grounded all the time, and it's power side controlled by, well, it's got to be in neutral, by the ECM. Okay, well, let's find out where this relay is. So according to this, it's not the relay that I was taking out. It is this one right here, starter relay. Now I never heard it clicking, we're going to go check that relay. I'm just printing this diagram, but looking at this relay center here, that one there would be labeled K, INJ, PTC, whatever that is, according to what I see. But we're going to have a look. Well, looking at this legend here, that's the third relay up, so that would be 1, 2, 3. This relay I took out here. And if I put that relay in, man, that relay's hot. If I put a relay jumper in there, it should crank the starter. I wonder if the starter is already jammed in place. The control circuit lights up. Well, I'm going to put a test light across these two control pins here. The two smaller pins are the control pins, and see if they lights up a test light when the starter is energized. So I've wired in a small test light on the control side of that relay. I'm using a 194 bulb, which draws about the same amount of current as the control side of this relay, so it loads the circuit. That if that's the starter relay, that light bulb should light indicate the starter relay is being energized. Okay, so that's definitely the starter relay. So it seems to me that the starter's jammed and locked in place, or the engine's seized. Because when I put this switch in, this jumper in, should make it crank. I can hear the starter trying to engage. Let's try and turn this engine over. So there's no convenient place to get at a bolt we can turn here. So I'm going to have to lift this up and try turning the crankshaft. So there's an access panel that you can remove. I put the 7/8 socket or a 22 mil socket. As soon as I turned it, I heard the starter go click, like the solenoid was stuck in. But the engine turns fine, so it's not seized. I wonder if it'll crank now. So it still doesn't make any attempt to crank when I put this jumper in here. That's my air compressor venting. I put the relay back in and I can hear the relay clicking when it's energized. Let's see if we've got power on one of those large diameter pins. The pin grip is good. Let's grab a test light and see if we got power on this pin. So one of these should be live. Okay, that one's live, and that one probably goes to the starter motor. So now if I go across here, it should light, and it does. So we have continuity through the solenoid. So the starter has failed. Hold in or pull in winding has failed. Maybe that little motor terminal has corroded off the starter, but I was sure he told me it was cranking and not starting. But some people don't know the difference. You know, hello, my car won't start. What do you mean it won't start? Well, you know, I put the key in and turn it and it doesn't start. Well, that's probably why the intake air temp sensor code was live. That's not supposed to be unplugged. That's the mass airflow sensor. Why was that unplugged? Interesting. So let's see where that starter lives. We're looking underneath the vehicle. Look up, way up there underneath the intake manifold. Yay! I feel like the friendly giant. Some of you guys will remember that. Look up, way up. There's Rusty. Oh my gosh. I bet you have to remove the intake plenum to get that starter out of there. Well, let's look up the service literature and see what it says. So here's the removal procedure. Remove the air cleaner intake duct and air cleaner intake hose, battery and battery tray, engine room undercover front AB. So it doesn't say you have to remove the intake. Bolts go in from the bell housing side. Slide the starter assembly and remove the starter connector and terminal. Remove the starter assembly from the lower front of the engine. Okay, fair enough. Let's see if we can find one. So I checked at the local Napa store, and retails for $467. And let's see if they have any. Well, Winnipeg, it shows 2 in Winnipeg. Let's see if there's anything in Thunder Bay here. Lots of zeros. 2 in Winnipeg. Okay, Auto Parts Central. They're $420, $419 retail. And check more locations, nothing local. Come on, you can do it. Boucherville for 3 and Brampton for 6, so that's 3 to 4 days to get that. And let's try Part Source. Part Source shows 1 in stock. Now this is a Champion Reman. I'm not overly fond of Champion Reman. It's like Canadian Tire. I would have preferred the Wilson. The Wilson, as you can see, is $460 and the Champion's $265. Well, they do have it in stock, so we're going to add that to the cart and get a hold of the customer and talk to him about this. And I'm sure he told me it was cranking, but you know, some people can't describe a no start condition correctly. So I just got off the phone with the customer, and he confirmed that he was driving it, he shut it off, came back out of a store, and it made no attempt to crank. It's exactly what it's doing here. He said he tried tapping on the starter from underneath, and that didn't help. Disconnected the battery a couple times, and it was him that inadvertently unplugged this MAF sensor. The service literature says we need to remove the battery and the battery tray and the air induction hose. I don't know if we have to take that off, but I've already taken off the 2 plastic push pins from here and the plastic duct that's going in. We're going to remove the battery out of here. So remove the air induction component, so I had to cut the bottom clamp because it was so rusty I couldn't turn it. Inspect this boot, make sure it's not cracked, and this one looks okay. So the starter bolts are way down in there. There's one right there you can see in the middle of the screen right now. That's one of them, and the other one is below it. Wow, it's still not that easy to get at. Maybe if we put this radiator hose up out of the way, and this is the battery cable here going to the starter. You can see it there. So you can get one bolt loose with a long 14 mil socket and a flex headed ratchet, and the other one you can get loose with a short handle flex headed ratchet and a 14 mil socket. So there is a brace from the back of the bell housing to the bottom of the intake manifold with looks like four, probably 8 mil bolts with 12 mil heads. Have to take that brace out. I've got the starter loose in there, but it won't come out of there. I'm hoping that I can go back enough to get it out and down, and then go over in this direction here. Might have to remove this coolant pipe. Man, this is not that easy. Well, I'm not having too much luck here. I undid the positive battery cable bracket here, clip here, another clip on the throttle body there, so that the cable will go in with the starter, because the positive cable is down there, inside there. And I can move the starter in about 1.5 inches, and then it hits the intake manifold. I can't see how to get this thing out of here. I've watched some videos on YouTube, and to be honest with you, they're not that good. Not that mine are any more professionally developed, but several people say you can take this out without taking the intake manifold off, and the service instructions suggest that too, but I can't get it out of there. Not yet anyways. It's very hard to see, but if I can get the starter out that far, it won't go any further. It's up against the manifold. It's jammed in between the manifold and the engine block. Won't come down, won't go up. Ay, ay, ay. Looks like there's a brace on the bottom of the intake here. Yeah. I think I'm going to take the intake partially off. So there's the starter finally out. So you can see what failed here. The motor terminal failed. So that would result in no pull-in winding circuit through the solenoid. So the solenoid won't have enough magnetic pull to engage, but it was still continuity through it. So it needs a starter. I did end up removing this bracket under the throttle body. Those bolts came out. I did end up removing a brace bolt right in the center up there. Can't see it, focus. It broke off on the bottom of the intake, and I loosened off the intake. I'll show you what else from the top. So there are 3 bolts and 2 nuts. You can access them through here, 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 and through there. You can see one of the bolts in behind there. And then there's a brace, a steel brace right here with a 10 mil bolt for the coolant pipes, because we just needed to move it away from the cylinder head a little bit. We don't need to take it right off, so we can leave all the fuel lines and electrical wires attached. I'm going to look in there and inspect that gasket. Hopefully it's a reusable silicone gasket. So there's a remanufactured starter assembly. I'm going to compare it to the original one, but it looks visually like the correct one. This little cable corroded off the original starter. This is the battery motor terminal. So without that circuit, the pull-in winding has no continuity through the brushes to ground. So you are left with just the hold-in winding, which is not enough magnetic pull to shift the fork into place. So the starter makes no sound whatsoever, yet still shows some continuity through the solenoid to ground with the test light. So we're going to go ahead and put this in. So clean the positive battery cable and inspect the ring gear teeth through the flywheel or through the starter opening here. You have to look in there with a mirror and turn the engine. Just in case there's a chipped tooth, you want to see it before you put the starter in. And we're ready to reinstall this starter. Now I took the little rubber boot off of this. Realistically, that's so somebody doesn't touch it, but you can't freaking get at it anyway, so it really doesn't do anything except prevent somebody from accidentally shorting the positive battery cable to a metal surface. So the starter is back in, the air induction system is back on, new clamp down here, intake manifold secured. I figured I should clean up a couple of these grounds here. They look a little compromised here. We got the battery out of the way, so I'm going to clean them, be proactive. So this little brace at the back of the intake manifold here actually has a hole in the manifold. You can see the orange O-ring there. Try and move this hose out of the way. So make sure that O-ring's in place. There's a little ear on it to locate it. I'm going to clean this off and reinstall it on the back of the intake. Must be for an EGR or something on some models. So there's that brace back on, these little 12mm headed bolts, and then there's one little 6mm with a 10mm head on the bracket, but never sees on the bolts in case you have to take this off again, make it easier. Now all that's left is to put the battery tray and the battery back in, and hopefully it's going to start. Well, let's see if it actually starts now. Moment of truth. Well, got to put some cosmetic covers back on the top of the engine and the air induction system back together, and we're good to go. Let's call this one fixed. Thanks for watching.